I was reviewing final details for our annual scholarship gala when my phone buzzed. The text was from my father. "Don't come to the family reunion tomorrow. Emma's boyfriend is a state senator now. We need to make a good impression. Your work might make things awkward. Hope you understand." I read it twice. Then a third time. Not because I was confused, because after 10 years it still hurt. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires hope. Hope that people will eventually see you. I had stopped hoping years ago. I simply replied, "Okay." Then I locked my phone and returned to work. Around me, dozens of staff members moved through the ballroom, making final preparations. The room looked beautiful. Crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers, 500 guests expected, business leaders, university presidents, community partners, and one special guest, State Senator Daniel Whitmore, the same senator my sister was apparently dating. The same senator my father thought would be embarrassed by me. What my family didn't know was that Senator Whitmore wasn't attending as Emma's boyfriend. He was attending because I invited him. I was the founder and executive director of the Future Scholars Foundation. For 10 years, we'd helped low-income students earn college scholarships. Last year alone, we'd funded nearly 700 students. My family never knew, because they never asked. Growing up, Emma was the star. Beautiful, popular, effortlessly charming. Everything came naturally to her. I was different. Quiet, bookish, serious. The daughter people forgot was sitting at the table. Whenever relatives visited, conversations revolved around Emma. Her grades, her boyfriends, her promotions, her vacations. I became background noise. At 19, I started volunteering at a youth mentoring center. I fell in love with the work, helping students navigate college applications, finding scholarships, changing lives. When I told my family I wanted to build a nonprofit, my father laughed. "That's a nice hobby," he said. "Hobby? You'll grow out of it." I never did. By 24, I had founded my own organization. By 28, we had offices across the state. By 32, we were one of the largest scholarship foundations in the region. Still, every family dinner sounded the same. "How's your little program going?" Little program. Thousands of students. Millions in scholarship funding. A staff of 41. But to them, it was still my little program. I stopped correcting them. It seemed pointless. The gala venue happened to be the same country club where my family planned to hold their reunion. Different ballroom, same building. A coincidence that would soon become impossible to ignore. At 6:30, Senator Whitmore arrived. He greeted me with a smile. "Rachel, everything looks incredible. Thank you, Senator." He glanced around. "You've built something remarkable." Coming from him, it meant a lot. We'd worked together for years on education initiatives. He knew exactly what the foundation accomplished. What he didn't know was that he was dating my sister. And what my sister didn't know was that I was the Rachel Morgan he constantly praised. Life can be funny sometimes. At 6:55, guests began taking their seats. I sat at the head table, directly beside the senator. The ballroom buzzed with conversation. Then the doors opened. Senator Whitmore entered with Emma on his arm. She looked stunning. She always did. They approached the table. The event coordinator showed them their seats. Emma smiled politely. Then she looked up and saw me. Her smile vanished. For a moment, she simply stared. "Rachel?" I smiled. "Hi, Emma." Senator Whitmore looked between us, confused, then his eyes landed on my nameplate. Rachel Morgan, Executive Director. Future Scholars Foundation. His entire expression changed. "Wait." He looked at Emma, then back at me. "Rachel Morgan, yes." His voice dropped. "You're Rachel Morgan?" "The one you've worked with for 3 years," I said gently. Emma's face turned white. The senator slowly sat down. "You never told me your sister was Rachel." Emma swallowed. "I didn't know." The words sounded weak even to her. "You didn't know?" She looked around helplessly. I knew she worked at some nonprofit. Some nonprofit. I almost laughed. The senator stared at her. "Rachel's foundation has awarded over $30 million in scholarships." Emma said nothing. She's testified before legislative committees. Silence. She's one of the most respected education advocates in the state. More silence. Finally, I spoke. It's okay. But it wasn't, not really. The problem wasn't that they underestimated my success. The problem was they never cared enough to ask. The gala began. I gave my opening remarks, talked about the students we'd helped, the dreams we'd funded, the futures we'd changed. The audience applauded. Emma sat quietly beside the senator. For the first time in her life, she looked uncertain. Then Senator Whitmore took the stage. The room fell silent. He adjusted the microphone, looked out across hundreds of guests. Then he said something I will never forget. Tonight is about opportunity. But before I begin, I want to recognize someone extraordinary. He turned toward me. Rachel Morgan built this organization from nothing. Applause filled the room. Thousands of students have attended college because she refused to accept that financial hardship should determine a child's future. More applause. Then his expression became thoughtful. You know, earlier tonight I learned something. The room listened. I learned how easy it is to overlook people when we think we already know who they are. A pause. Sometimes the people changing lives aren't the loudest people in the room. Another pause. They're simply doing the work. The applause became thunderous. I saw tears forming in Emma's eyes. Not because she was as embarrassed. Because she finally understood. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. By the end of the gala, we'd raised nearly $5 million. A record. Guests congratulated us. Students shared their stories. Families cried. Lives would change because of what happened in that room. That mattered more than anything. As I was leaving, my phone exploded with messages. Dad, Mom, Emma, cousins, aunts, uncles. Everyone suddenly wanted to talk. I ignored them. Not out of revenge, out of exhaustion. Near midnight, my father called again. This time Emma answered, Rachel. His voice was shaking. Why didn't you tell us? I closed my eyes. There it was. The question I knew was coming. Tell you what? About all of this. I sat quietly for a moment, then I said the truth. Because you never asked. Silence. Heavy silence. Dad, when was the last time you asked about my work? No answer. When was the last time you asked what my foundation actually does? Nothing. You told me not to come because you thought I would embarrass you. His breath caught. We were wrong. Yes, another's. Silence. Then his voice broke. I'm sorry. For the first time, I believed he meant it. I looked out at the dark road ahead, thought about the students we'd helped, the scholarships, the futures. The lives changed. That had always been the victory. Not proving my family wrong, not watching them freeze in shock, not hearing a senator praise me. The victory was building something meaningful when nobody was watching. The victory was becoming the person I wanted to be without waiting for permission. And somehow that made everything else feel very small. The text arrived at 3:12 p.m. on a Thursday. I was standing in the ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel, reviewing the final details for a fundraising gala that had taken nearly a year to organize. 500 guests, 30 corporate sponsors, 2 state senators, 1 lieutenant governor, and a fundraising goal of $4 million. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. Asterisk, don't come to dinner tomorrow. Asterisk, Emma's boyfriend is Senator Daniel Harper. We don't want any awkward conversations about your nonprofit job. Just sit this one out, Dad. I stared at the screen. Read it twice, then a third time. Not because I was surprised, because I wasn't. After 10 years of being treated like the disappointing child, nothing my family did surprised me anymore. I simply typed back. Asterisk, okay. Then I locked my phone and returned to work. What my father didn't know was that Senator Daniel Harper wasn't attending my sister's dinner. He was attending my gala as the keynote speaker, and he would be sitting at my table. Growing up in the Bennett family meant living in the shadows. My older sister Emma was beautiful, popular, effortlessly admired. My younger brother Tyler was the athlete. Scholarships, championships, local newspaper features. Then there was me, Olivia. The quiet one, the one who worked for charities, the one everyone described as sweet, never successful, Never impressive, just sweet. At 23, I started volunteering at a community center, helping families facing housing insecurity. Fell in love with the work, not because it paid well, because it mattered. When I told my family I wanted to build a non-profit focused on preventing family homelessness, they laughed. Dad called it a phase. Emma called it cute. Tyler asked when I'd get a real job. I stopped explaining myself after that. Years passed. While they celebrated promotions, luxury vacations, and expensive cars, I built something. Quietly, carefully, one family at a time, one grant at a time, one victory at a time. By 32, my organization had grown into one of the largest housing advocacy nonprofits in the state. We had 40 employees, a budget exceeding $7 million, thousands of families served. But my family never knew, because they never asked. To them, I still worked at that little charity. The gala tonight celebrated our 10th anniversary, staged event we'd ever hosted, and Senator Daniel Harper had agreed months ago to deliver the keynote address. At 6:15 p.m., guests began arriving. The ballroom glowed under crystal chandeliers, elegant centerpieces, live music, television cameras. Everything looked perfect. At 6:40, Senator Harper arrived. "Olivia," he said warmly, "this looks incredible." "Thank you, Senator," he smiled. "I've been looking forward to this event for months." We spent a few minutes discussing the program. Then he mentioned something casually. "I'm actually bringing my girlfriend tonight." "Of course," I said. "We have a seat reserved." "Great. She's having dinner with her family nearby before joining us." I almost laughed, but kept my expression neutral. Life had a strange sense of humor. At 6:58 p.m., guests began taking their seats. I settled at the head table. The room buzzed with anticipation. Then the ballroom doors opened, and Emma walked in holding Senator Harper's arm. She looked stunning, confident, proud, the kind of proud that comes from believing you've won. They approached the head table. Daniel smiled, then looked at the name card beside his seat. Olivia Bennett, founder and executive director. His smile vanished. He looked up, at me, then back at the card, then at me again. His entire body froze. "Olivia?" I smiled politely. "Good evening, Senator." Emma's face immediately changed. Confusion, then concern, then panic. "Wait," she whispered. "You?" The event coordinator pulled out their chairs. Daniel sat slowly, still staring. "You're Olivia Bennett?" "Yes." "The Olivia Bennett who founded Home First Alliance?" I nodded. Emma looked like she couldn't breathe. Daniel blinked several times. "Emma?" His voice sounded strained. "You told me your sister worked at a small nonprofit." "She does," Emma replied weakly. Daniel looked around the ballroom. The stage. The screens displaying fundraising totals. The hundreds of guests. The elected officials. The corporate leaders. Then back to me. "This organization is one of the most influential housing advocacy groups in the region." Silence. Heavy silence. Emma's hands trembled. "I didn't know." Daniel turned toward her. "You didn't know?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because there was no explanation. Only years of assumptions. The program began. I delivered my opening remarks, spoke about the families we'd helped. The children who now had stable homes. The mothers who no longer slept in cars. The fathers who found hope again. Then I introduced Senator Harper. The room applauded. He stepped onto the stage, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly at me. "For years," he began, "I've worked alongside remarkable people dedicated to public service." The room grew quiet. "But tonight, I want to talk about someone extraordinary." His gaze never left my table. Olivia Bennett built this organization from nothing. Applause. She created systems that have helped thousands of families avoid homelessness. More applause. She has influenced policy, secured funding, and changed lives. The audience nodded, listening, captivated. Then his voice softened. "And tonight something troubling." The room became still. I learned how easy it is to overlook people. How easy it is to assume someone's work isn't important simply because we never bothered to understand it. Emma stared at the floor. Daniel continued. Sometimes, the people doing the most meaningful work receive the least recognition. The audience listened carefully. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the greatest responsibility. A pause. A long one. Then he raised his glass. To Olivia Bennett. To the people who build lives instead of headlines. The ballroom erupted. 500 people rose to their feet. Standing ovation. The applause seemed endless. I remained composed. But inside, something shifted. Not because strangers were applauding. Because, for the first time, my family's leg was seeing reality. Not the version they invented. The truth. After the speech, my phone exploded. Messages, calls, voicemails, dad, mom, Tyler, cousins, aunts, uncles. Everyone suddenly wanted answers. I ignored them. The gala mattered more. By the end of the night, we had raised nearly $5 million. A record. As guests departed, Daniel approached me. Olivia, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. For what? For almost believing what I was told. I smiled faintly. You asked questions. Most people don't. He nodded, then glanced toward Emma standing alone near the exit. She looked devastated. Not because of embarrassment, because consequences had finally arrived. Weeks later, Dad called. This time I answered, his voice cracked. We didn't know. I stared out my office window. You didn't ask. Silence. Long silence. Then he whispered, You're right. The truth hurt, but it was still the truth. For years, they measured success by appearances, titles, status, attention. Meanwhile, I had spent a decade helping people rebuild their lives. The irony was almost unbearable. Eventually, my family tried to repair the relationship. Slowly, awkwardly. Some conversations were painful. Others were healing. But one thing never changed. I stopped needing their approval. Because the real victory wasn't watching my family realize they were wrong. It wasn't the senator's speech. It wasn't the standing ovation. It wasn't the shock on Emma's face. The real victory was every family's sleeping safely because of our work. Every child with a stable home. Every life changed. I had built something that mattered, while everyone assumed I worked at a little nonprofit. And if I had the chance to do it all again, I would, every single time. The text arrived at 1:43 p.m. on a Saturday. I was standing on a ladder in the ballroom of the Crescent Hotel, helping adjust a banner above the stage. 300 sponsors, 600 guests, a fundraising goal of $8 million, and one event that had taken 11 months to build. My phone buzzed. I climbed down and checked the screen. It was from my father. Asterisk, skip the reunion tomorrow. Asterisk, Ava's boyfriend is Senator Grant Holloway now. The family wants to make a good impression. We don't need conversations getting awkward about your charity work. Asterisk, hope you understand. I read the message twice, then once more. Not because it hurt, at least not anymore. The hurt had happened years ago. This was simply confirmation. Another reminder of who I was in their eyes. The daughter with the little nonprofit. The daughter who never became anyone important. I typed one word. Asterisk, okay. Then I slipped my phone into my pocket and returned to work. What my father didn't know was that Senator Grant Holloway wasn't the most important guest in my weekend. He was one of them. Because Senator Grant Holloway was the keynote speaker at my gala that evening, and his name was sitting directly beside mine at the head table. Growing up in the Mercer family meant living in comparison. My older sister Ava was beautiful, effortlessly beautiful, homecoming queen, magazine-worthy smile, the kind of woman people remembered after meeting once. My younger brother Ethan was the star athlete. Scholarships, championships, sports interviews, and me? I was Claire, the quiet middle child, the one who volunteered at shelters, the one who worked weekends, the one everybody described with the same word, nice. Never successful, never impressive, just nice. At 21, while Ava was posting vacation photos and Ethan was signing endorsement deals at college, I started volunteering at a transitional housing center. I met families who had lost everything. Single mothers sleeping in cars, children doing homework in motel rooms, people one emergency away from disaster. Something changed inside me. I couldn't look away, so I stayed. When I told my family I wanted to build a housing advocacy nonprofit, Dad laughed. "That's admirable," he said. "But eventually you'll need a real career." Ava smiled sympathetically. She's got a big heart. The way people talk about children, not professionals, not leaders, children. I stopped sharing my plans after that and started building instead. Quietly, year after year, grant after grant, family after family, while nobody paid attention. By 33, my organization, Haven Forward, operated across 4 counties. We had 52 employees, a budget exceeding $11 million, and partnerships with major hospitals, schools, and state agencies. My family never knew, because they never asked. To them, I still worked at a small charity. At 5:30 p.m., the ballroom looked perfect. Crystal chandeliers, elegant centerpieces, a massive stage. The Haven Forward logo illuminated across 2 giant screens. The room buzzed with possibility. Tonight wasn't about me. It was about the thousands of families we served. At 6:10, Senator Holloway arrived. He greeted me warmly. "Claire, this venue is incredible." "Thank you, Senator." He adjusted his cufflinks and smiled. "I've been talking about this event for weeks." We reviewed the schedule, discussed his speech. Then he checked his watch. "My girlfriend should be here soon." I nearly laughed. Instead, I nodded professionally. Wonderful. At 6:55, guests started filling the ballroom. Corporate executives, state officials, major donors, community leaders. Every table filled quickly. The energy felt electric. At 7:02, the ballroom doors opened, and Ava walked inside, holding Senator Holloway's arm. She looked stunning, confident, radiant. The way she always looked when she believed she was the center of the room. They approached the head table together. The event coordinator guided them toward their seats. Grant glanced down at the place cards, then froze, completely. His eyes moved from the card to me, then back again. His face has lost all color. "Claire?" Ava frowned. "What?" He pointed. "Claire Mercer." I smiled politely. "Good evening, Senator." Ava turned toward me, confused, then shocked, then terrified, because she was finally seeing something she had never bothered to look for. Grant blinked repeatedly. "You're Claire Mercer? The founder of Haven Forward?" "Yes." The silence was deafening. Ava stared at the ballroom, the stage, the sponsors, the giant screensies, the hundreds of guests, then back at me. "You run this?" "I founded it 12 years ago." Her mouth fell open. Grant sat down slowly, still staring. "Claire, Haven Forward is one of the most respected housing organizations in the state." Ava swallowed hard. "I didn't know." Grant looked at her. "You didn't know?" She couldn't answer, because there wasn't an answer. Only assumptions. Years and years of assumptions. The program began. I welcomed the audience, shared stories of families who had rebuilt their lives. Children who finally had stable homes. Parents who no longer feared eviction. The audience listened as some cried, some applauded. Then I introduced Senator Holloway. The room erupted. He walked onto the stage, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly toward our table. "I've spoken at many events," he began, "but tonight is special." The ballroom grew quiet. "Because tonight celebrates something extraordinary." He gestured toward me. "Claire Mercer," applause echoed immediately. She built Haven Forward from a single rented office and 1 volunteer. More applause. Today, her organization serves thousands of families every year. The audience nodded, listening carefully. Then his tone shifted, softer, more personal. "Earlier tonight, I learned something that troubled me." The room became silent. Sometimes we overlook remarkable people because they don't fit our idea of success. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Sometimes we dismiss people doing life-changing work because they're not seeking attention. Ava's eyes filled with tears. Grant continued. "We assume, we judge, we fail to ask questions." His gaze briefly landed on her, then returned to the audience. "Claire Mercer didn't build headlines." He paused. "She built hope." The ballroom erupted. People rose to their feet, one after another. 600 guests standing, applauding, cheering, a standing ovation that seemed endless. I remained seated for a moment, calm, composed. But inside, something felt different. Not victory, not revenge, relief. The truth had finally entered the room. After the speech, my phone exploded, messages flooded in. Dad, Mom, Ethan, cousins, aunts. People who hadn't asked about my work in years suddenly wanted details. I ignored every message. The gala deserved my attention, not their guilt. By the end of the night, we surpassed our goal. $8.7 million raised. A record. Families would receive help. Programs would expand. Lives would change. That mattered. Everything else was background noise. As guests departed, Grant approached me. Claire, his voice was quiet. I owe you an apology. I shook my head. For what? For believing I understood your story. I smiled faintly. Most people never ask. He looked toward Ava, standing alone near the exit. I did eventually. That's what matters. 3 days later, Dad called. I answered. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he finally said it. We didn't know. I stared out my office window. At the city I had spent 12 years helping. No, Dad. My voice remained calm. You didn't ask. Silence. Painful silence. The kind that arrives when somebody finally faces the truth. Months later, things slowly changed. Conversations became real. Questions became genuine. Effort replaced assumptions. But the biggest change happened inside me. I stopped waiting for recognition. Because the real victory wasn't the senator freezing at the head table. It wasn't the standing ovation. It wasn't watching my family's assumptions collapse. The real victory was every family haven forward helped. Every child sleeping safely. Every parent finding hope again. I had spent 12 years building something extraordinary while everyone thought I worked at a little charity. And if nobody had ever noticed, I still would have built it. Because changing lives was always worth more than being seen. The comment came during Sunday dinner. My mother was passing mashed potatoes. My older brother was talking about a promotion. My younger sister was showing photos from her vacation in Greece. And I was quietly answering a text from one of our case managers. Dad noticed. Work again, he asked. I nodded. A family we'd been helping was about to lose their apartment. He chuckled. 12 years later, and you're still busy with that little charity job. The table laughed softly, not cruelly, not loudly, almost casually, which somehow hurt more. I smiled. The same smile I'd perfected over the years. The smile that said I wasn't bothered, even when I was, because this wasn't new. For 12 years, my family had reduced my life's work to 3 words, little charity job. When I graduated from college and took a position at a nonprofit helping families escape poverty, they called it a phase. When I stayed for a second year, they called it idealism. When I started my own organization at 25, they called it cute. And when that organization grew into one of the largest anti-poverty networks in the state, they still called it my little charity job. I stopped correcting them years ago. What was the point? People only learn when they want to, and my family had never wanted to know. They never asked how many people we helped, never asked how many employees I managed, never asked how large our programs had become, never asked anything. So I stopped volunteering information. I simply built, quietly, relentlessly, one family at a time, one grant at a time, one impossible challenge after another. By 37, I was the executive director of Pathways Forward. We operated in 6 cities, managed a budget of nearly $10 million, employed 48 people, and served thousands of struggling families every year. My family didn't know any of that, because they never cared enough to ask. 3 weeks after that dinner, we held our annual fundraising gala. It was our biggest event of the year, 700 guests. Major donors, business leaders, community advocates, and one special guest, State Senator Marcus Reed. Marcus and I had worked together for years on housing and workforce legislation. He believed in our mission. More importantly, he understood it. The ballroom looked stunning. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished floors. Elegant centerpieces lined every table. A giant screen displayed stories from families we'd helped. Everything represented years of work, years nobody had noticed. I stood backstage reviewing the evening schedule when my assistant approached. "Your family just arrived." I blinked. "My family?" She nodded. "They purchased tickets last week." That surprised me. My parents had never attended one of our events. Not once. Neither had my brother or sister. Apparently, curiosity had finally defeated indifference. I peeked into the ballroom. There they were: Mom, Dad, Ryan, Sophie. Looking slightly uncomfortable among politicians, executives, and philanthropists. I wondered what they thought this event would be. A church fundraiser? A bake sale? A community picnic? The reality was considerably different. At 7 o'clock, the program began. I walked onto the stage. The spotlight followed me. 700 faces looked forward. The room fell silent. I welcomed everyone, shared stories from families we'd helped, spoke about our mission, our progress, our goals. Then I stepped down. As I passed my family's table, I noticed something. They looked confused. Dad's eyebrows were furrowed. Ryan kept glancing between me and the stage. Sophie seemed stunned. Good. Maybe they were finally paying attention. The evening continued. Awards were presented. Videos played. Donations climbed higher. Then came the keynote address. Senator Kirkutz-Reed walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate. He thanked the audience, acknowledged sponsors. Then his tone shifted. I've spoken at many events throughout my career. The room grew quiet. But tonight is different. He looked toward my table, toward me. Because tonight we're celebrating someone extraordinary. My stomach tightened. Marcus hadn't shown me his speech. I suddenly wished he had. He continued. 12 years ago, a young woman saw families falling through cracks in a broken system. The room listened carefully. Instead of complaining, she acted. A photo appeared on the giant screen. A much younger version of me standing beside a folding table in a tiny office. The audience smiled. She built an organization from almost nothing. Another photo. Our first staff meeting. 4 people, 1 room. Second-hand furniture. Today, that organization serves thousands of families every year. Applause followed. Marcus paused, then looked directly toward where my family sat. Yet what impresses me most isn't the growth. The room became completely silent. It's her character. His voice softened. I've watched Olivia Bennett spend evenings personally in families facing eviction. I've watched her fight for policy changes that protected children she'd never meet. I've watched her turn down opportunities for personal recognition because she believed the mission mattered more than the spotlight. The audience applauded again. My eyes began to sting. Marcus continued. People often celebrate wealth, titles, status, but real success is measured by impact. He pointed toward me. Olivia Bennett has changed more lives than most public officials ever will. The room erupted. Applause thundered across the ballroom. But Marcus wasn't finished. Last year alone, Pathways Forward helped over 5,000 families. Gasps moved through the crowd. Her organization secured $23 million in housing support. More applause. Her work influenced legislation that now protects thousands of vulnerable citizens. Then came the line nobody expected. The line that changed everything. I once overheard someone describe Olivia's career as a little charity job. The audience laughed lightly. Marcus smiled. I can assure you, he paused. There is nothing little about changing the world. Silence. Then 700 people stood, one after another. A standing ovation. The sound was overwhelming. I looked toward my family's table. Mom was crying. Ryan stared at the stage as if seeing me for the first time. Sophie covered her mouth. And Dad looked devastated. Not angry, not embarrassed, devastated. Like a man realizing he had spent 12 years misunderstanding honor. The applause continued. Longer than any standing ovation I'd ever received. When it finally ended, Marcus stepped down. As he passed me, he squeezed my shoulder. You earned every second of that. I couldn't speak. Only nod. The event concluded 2 hours later. We raised a record amount. Enough to expand programs into 2 new communities. Enough to help hundreds more families. The real victory. The one that mattered. As guests departed, my family approached, slowly, awkwardly, like strangers. Dad spoke first. His voice cracked. Olivia. I waited. He swallowed hard. We didn't know. For a moment, 12 years of frustration surged through me. 12 years of dismissal, of assumptions, of being invisible. Then I said the only truthful thing. You never asked. Nobody argued. Because nobody could. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. Ryan looked away. Sophie stared at the floor, and Dad simply nodded, slowly, painfully. Because the truth had landed, not through revenge, not through confrontation, not through anger, through reality. The reality that while they were busy measuring success by titles and appearances, I had spent 12 years changing lives. Months later, things improved. Not overnight. Trust never returns that easily. But effort appeared, questions appeared, interests appeared. For the first time, my family wanted to know me. The real me. Not the version they had invented. And sometimes I think back to that dinner. To Dad's comment. That little charity job. Funny thing is, the words don't hurt anymore. Because 700 people stood and applauded that night. Not because I was important. Not because a senator praised me. But because the work mattered. The families mattered. The lives changed mattered. And in the end, that's what success had always meant. Even when nobody was paying attention.